So you might not like this, but if you've been following my arguments here, it's pretty clear. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is called by the grid. The function of this card in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is called by the grave. Called by the Grave is a card that is not that good going second. Usually, you can use it sometimes, but it's not likely to win you the game if your opponent goes full combo anyways. Ash Blossom is the same thing. Ash Blossom is very mediocre when you go second on average at the moment against all of these decks in the format, but when you go first, it becomes a god card. Just like Called by the Grave, it checks your opponent's most powerful hand traps, and if you don't need it, if you can combo anyways because your opponent didn't draw a Molcharmy, well, I guess I'm making a full board and I have an Ash on top of it. Try to beat that. I guess you won't. Ash Blossom is literally Called by the Grave. So, and this is, I think, a perfect example of a card just not aging well. This card was a card that helped the player going second once upon a time when decks had meaningful choke points, but it is not that anymore. It is simply not that anymore. And I guess that's what I've been trying to get across here. I'm not trying to ramble for too long, even though I know people like these sort of like in-depth card design discussions. That's why I really wanted to make that video. And so that is, I guess, my point here. And feel free to let me know about a couple of things. But like, I guess the main statements that I wanted to get across are number one, I believe the future of Yu-Gi-Oh! With archetypes getting more and more powerful, which I've come to terms with combo decks existing. I've come to terms with one-card combos. You know, I've spoken my piece on this sort of stuff. You know, but if that stuff has to exist, if combos have to exist, if people love these kind of playstyles, and they make decks like this, there needs to be counterplay. And if the player going first is so favored if they resolve their combo, non-engine in the game needs to favor the player going second. It needs to help the player going second disproportionately more than the player going first. You know, and that is my problem with cards like Nibiru and Droll, which Nibiru technically promotes healthier gameplay when you draw it going second. You know, it forces the opponent to play around it, and sometimes, like a lot of decks these days, are actually designed to like play around Nibiru to an extent, but you can usually still use it to make their board weaker. Like Yami is a good example of this. Like you can usually prevent the Herald of the Arclight, for example, if you want to with Nibiru against Yami. Like it'll always be live. So Nibiru going second, I would classify as a relatively healthy card. And even Roland Knockbird, when you go second, is probably fine for the game. Like the player going second, drawing Roland Knockbird is fair, I think. The problem with both of these cards is that they become basically unbeatable when the player going first draws, because they have no clause that prevents them from being used when you go first. And so this is what differentiates the Molcharmies from cards like Nibiru, Droll, and also Maxi. You know, this is something that Maxi is completely lacking. Because any ability to make any half board under Maxi is completely out of the window when your opponent has already set up a full board. Like you can't just go IP pass or whatever you do against Maxi in your deck if your opponent already has a full board. It's not an option, so you just lose. I think more ways to help the player going second are the future of Yu-Gi-Oh! In order to balance things a little bit. And I believe Ash Blossom is a little bit out of place now because they've realized already that like they need to stop making these one-on-one interactions in order, because it just doesn't work well when people are summoning cards like Noroi or Dormouse or Ice or the Dodo or Neptibus or Cupsy. Like none of these cards like you can stop with one-on-one hand traps. It simply does not work. So we need cards like the Molcharmies. We need cards like Phimena as well. You know, Phimena and Holy Sue and stuff like that are all great examples of this. And Ash Blossom has basically been downgraded to like a Called by the Grave in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope I was able to get that point across. I hope everyone had fun watching the discussion, I guess. Please let me know in the comments down below what you think of this. Was I able to get my points across clear? Do you agree with what I'm saying? If not, then why not? Because I feel like I've made some pretty good points here, but maybe you disagree. Let me know why. But yeah, this video is probably releasing around Christmas time, so if you're seeing this around the Christmas holidays, then Merry Christmas to you all if you celebrate, or if not, I just wish you some happy holidays or some nice days off work or whatever. Thank you so much for watching. We're probably gonna have like an end of the year recap stream soon-ish, where we're also gonna do the design awards. I'm gonna throw the link to the design awards down in the description as well. There's gonna be your last chance to participate. We already have over 4,000 responses to the 2025 card design, like what people liked and what they didn't like, and so on and so forth. So if you haven't taken part in that yet, feel free to take part. Link is going to be in the description down below. I would really appreciate any input, and maybe we can provide like meaningful feedback that's going to change things in the future. But yeah, let me know what you think of the topic. Make sure to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Hope you have a wonderful holidays, and thank you for watching. Bye bye. Peace.
We're doing Squiddy the Goat Duel, who is, y'all know Squiddy from, I think he's technically on Tombox's channel. At least he was the cameraman at Worlds, I remember meeting him. Was it this Yu-Gi-Oh documentary thing that has almost a million views? It's kind of wacky. So let's check this out and see what's going on here.
But I decided
how one man sabotaged the Yu-Gi-Oh tournament for
that's
1,500
why it made people very upset. How did one man's strategy nearly sabotage an entire Yu-Gi-Oh tournament for over 1,000 players? This is a story of a man who surprised the world with a toxic strategy that no one wanted to play against. It was a stall deck that had the tournament for hours longer than it was supposed to be. And it got to the point where even if the judges wanted to disqualify him, they couldn't because he was still technically playing within the rules. A fact that would be...
Okay, that's, like, incorrect. The judge can disqualify you even though you're technically not doing anything wrong and breaking rules because it comes under tournament policy, like, essentially, Konami reserves the right to disqualify anyone for any reason. Like, that's, like, in the fine print. So, they can do that for any reason, essentially. False? It's not false. They also established this a long time ago. If you guys remember the guys who showed up with like a 2,000 cards deck, you're just disrupting the flow of the tournament, right? Like that, you can infer, you can justify disqualifying someone who's causing a holdup of the tournament. You definitely can't do that. That is a fact.
Rather ironic for
like, what do you like? Think about it realistically. You think you can like play some like deck or combo that technically like can hold up a venue for like 3 days, and Konami are just gonna be like, oh yeah, no, sure, yeah, there's venue security, you know, the event staff, production team, no, they all need to stay here and watch. Like, just think about it realistically. Like, you can't. What are they gonna do? Chain the judges to radiate? Like, no. Like, of course they can legally end the tournament whenever they really want. Technically.
22-year-old Alan Pennington himself was
I remember this guy.
well-known head judge in Florida.
But he talked with Monarchs in like 2018 or something.
Online, he would be barred from enlisting as a head judge for future tournaments, a canon event that would unleash the start of his villain saga. 2 weeks before the regional,
a canon event
gets an email basically explicitly saying that they are not allowed to have me as a head judge. It was because of the fact that I had been criticizing Konami's policies online. So these were things
with the solid
power creep I thought better, so on, you know. So yeah, online I was posting some things about Konami, and left unable to oversee the tournaments as a head judge, he instead turned his focus to joining them as a player.
So, like, can I just say, it's really jarring when he keeps going back and forth between different, like, times of Alan, because, like, sometimes he has hair, sometimes he doesn't, and I'm confused, like, when the timeline is.
With his eyes set on an upcoming major event, YCS San Diego, a championship-level tournament that would draw the strongest players from the continent. But he would have some time to prepare, with several local tournaments and smaller regional qualifiers to first test his theories. And through his research, one particular strategy would catch his attention. Originally surfacing at a regional by a fellow duelist with the name of Tyler Nolan, it was the first iteration of what would be called the Gishki FTK. The concept was pretty simple. Use draw spells to draw as much of his own deck as possible, possible, and then use cards like Hand Destruction and Card Destruction to force the opponent
Was
to draw
Gishki ever like
cards
real?
until they eventually decked out.
Because I've heard of it being like an annoying FTK for years, but was it ever like actually like a real deck?
6-3 at a regional with Gishki FTK, and this kind of
Because I didn't play during that period.
It's like, hey, it's a regional.
Still is, yeah.
Went 6-3. Cares. Tyler was kind of on the same wavelength as me in that we were not really what we would call meta players. And I was like, this is pretty much like the pinnacle of a weird combo deck. Now, to achieve this, over half of the deck would be composed of draw cards, ranging from Upstart Goblin to Into the Void, Trade-In, Moray of Greed, Darkworld Dealings, and of course the newly released One Day of Peace, a card that would force both players to draw a card, but also prevent any damage being dealt for the next 2 turns. I always like to push games to their limits. Show me something broken, and then let me come up with something even more broken. But you might be wondering how a deck out situation would be possible, because the opponent would technically have to draw almost 40 cards to deck out. And with card destruction being
such a
limited
good
to
editor,
one copy
man. This
per
is
deck
like a
due to
really
rampant
well put
abuse in the
together video.
past, this might prove to be a challenge. But they quickly discovered it was possible to easily recycle card destruction and hand destruction with an engine that everyone had previously disregarded, the Gishki engine. Gishki FTK is a combo deck. Play a bunch of draw spells, draw your entire deck. Then you put your graveyard back into your deck, draw your entire deck again, your graveyard back into your deck, draw your entire deck again. And you can keep doing this as long as you want. It is an
Wait, is this the combo? It's just infinitely loops One Day of Peace to deck your opponent out? This is miserable.
This card would allow the user to recycle back 5 cards from either graveyard back to the owner's deck,
It's
meaning
up to
they
as
could
well.
recycle card destruction quite easily. The Gishki ritual spell, Gishki Aqua Mirror, had a built-in graveyard effect that could shuffle itself back to the deck and then return a Gishki ritual monster in your graveyard back to your hand, creating a failsafe that prevents the user from decking out, but also allowing them to recycle the resources so they can loop Evagishki Mind August over and over again. And of course, being older cards released before the designers imposed a hard once per turn restriction, both of these cards could be activated as many times.
What was the first ever once per turn card?
Aqua Mirror and 2 copies of Mind August, you could essentially create a pseudo-infinite loop. You want to design a game? Okay, make you earn your paycheck. I'm going to show you the worst possible consequences of your game design. They would try and draw their entire deck, a feat that was attained pretty easily with the amount of draw
Mind
spells
on air.
played. And of course, this was over a decade ago, where hand traps were not very prevalent. Ash Blossom Joy Spring was not a thing, so you could not stop the effect of draw spells. And even though Drone Lockbird was released, no one was really playing it because back then the decks didn't do any searching, so there was nothing you could really side it against besides this deck, which no one really knew about. Effect Mailer was around, but it was pretty useless against the best decks, so it didn't see a lot of play. And against Gishki, it was somewhat effective against Royal Magical Library, but that was really about it. The only relevant hand traps against Gishki FTK were Nico Monte King and Droll Lockbird. People did not side those cards because they were literally unplayable against every other deck in the format. Once the deck was empty, Mind August could then...
When does Droll become like a good card? I mean, if you consider like Necros was a good deck in 2015 that searched constantly and no one played Droll.
Draw the salvage and the hand
I mean, it's been years before Droll was good.
While burning 2 cards from the opponent's deck at the same time. 2 copies of Gishki Aqua Mirror then return themselves to the deck to add back the Mind August and fodder to hand, followed by salvage adding back 2 copies of Gishki Shadow, then searching those same Aqua Mirrors. This would allow another copy of August to be resummoned, shuffling back salvage and hand destruction to the deck once more, allowing the freshly drawn hand destruction to then repeat the process, discarding Aqua Mirror for free each time, thanks to salvage's resource management. The Aqua Mirror
hand destruction in the anime, that's so funny.
Shadow to research to hand.
I mean, it's just Sasuke Samurai on the artwork, right?
Recycle infinite hand destructions and salvages, creating a bizarre...
Oh god, I've never actually looked at Mind August's
out the opponent
artwork.
every time hand destruction resolves.
Gee, a freak.
Interestingly enough, the rest of the Gishki engine also supported the consistency of this combo. Gishki Shadow could be discarded to search for Gishki Aqua Mirror, while Gishki Vision could be discarded to search for either Mind August or Soul Ogre, another Gishki ritual monster used solely as a level 8 body to discard with trade-in. And here is why the strategy was extremely toxic, because the combo took extremely long to execute. It wasn't an infinite combo, so to speak, because the combo lines would be different, so you couldn't just declare an infinite loop and say that you were conducting it over and over again. You had to physically play the cards each time, and despite a match of Yu-Gi-Oh! Being a best 2 out of 3, oftentimes the first game would take well over 40 minutes, leading to a timeout situation where they would win inevitably after conducting the loop, and because there's only enough time for...
You know, can I just say, obviously bad to, victim blame and stuff?
Buying and selling cards are the lifeblood and are one of the most appealing aspects of any physical trading card.
Okay, obviously bad to, victim blame and stuff. Why are you waiting there for 40 minutes for your point? Just scoop and go to game 2. Like, what are you waiting for? Like,
There would
I
not
just-
be a game 2 or a
the
game 3.
the person who is sitting, like, watching their opponent full Gishki combo, and they're just waiting for them to, like, maybe they'll mess up because technically it's not an infinite loop. He's like, oh, brother, like, I'm not sitting 40 minutes for a potential game 1 for you because maybe the order in which August shuffles the cards back into the deck and then for your hand destruction to draw the wrong order, like, oh, dude, like, I don't know. People back then were impaired and were like, surely this combo doesn't win in the first turn.
Player
Surely.
on the spot. What you can do...
It's a pretty unknown concept to just scoop back. To be fair, yes, this was a long time ago where time rules were 5 turns. So time was not really a thing you thought about.
After time has been called, and therefore you win the entire match 1-0.
Oh, no,
This, of course, meant that if you were
pointless
sitting
to
across
do.
the table from a deck like this, the counter strategy was to concede once you saw that they had the infinite loop going, so you had enough time to play a game 2 and a 3, where you could also take advantage of your side deck. You have to scoop, or I'm going to time you out on game 1. I mean, you're comboing me, I know I'm not going to win, I'm just going to scoop to save time. But the idea of scooping to save time was a foreign concept to people back then. The only
Yeah, it really
people
was.
that were scooping were people that were...
Bro! What? What? Dude, what is it? This is a text message from 2012 on an iPhone, like, 6? Like, look at that interface. Robbie Boyaja, this is an ex-Konami employee that used to work in... I can't remember what Boyajin did. I think he was R&D, or... Was he R&D? I don't know. He was an ex, like, face of, Konami for years. I feel like I want to say he ended up moving to, like... Well, I can't say, but, whatever.
Told about my deck by their friends and were like, hey, if you play this guy, make sure you scoop. But of course, with the strategy being rather new, no one really understood this, so they would just sit there and watch the players combo.
Crazy that he's
But
putting
at the
this
same time, there was a
okay.
conundrum for the opponent because there was
An
always
iPhone
a
3 or
chance
4?
of
Yeah,
the
okay.
deck
Even
missing.
worse.
Even after drawing the majority of the deck, surprisingly, there's a
Wait, it's a
mathematical
teacher? Wait,
chance that
actually?
the user does not assemble the
Konami
infinite combo,
rep
or
to
they actually
teacher
mess up one of
pipeline,
their sequences. There's a chance that they have to pass turn without executing the full loop. So conceding early would actually be a mistake for the player. And surprisingly,
really be the other way around, right?
Testing for Alan when he was close to fizzling and his opponent conceded. But the deck also had a glaring weakness.
Wait, hold on. Well, that's why you don't scoop. Towards the end, I got very close to fizzling, but my opponent actually conceded.
Conceding early would actually be a mistake for the player. And surprisingly,
We said that my opponent made it clear he knew how my deck worked, so I knew he would concede when it was obvious that I was going to win. I opened a fine starting hand that would likely result in FTKing. Towards the end, I got close to fizzling, but my opponent could... This is the most degenerate combo in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Because at least, like, with conventional FTKs, there's just, like, a line that you do, and you perform, you do the combo, and you FTK. This one takes, like, 40 minutes, and it's dynamic. So it isn't the same each time. That's crazy. Every time you shuffle back, the cards you draw off of the Hard Destruction and the 1 Day of Peace are gonna be different because you've shuffled your deck for the 5 cards. Like, a dynamic FTK like that means technically you should wait in case your opponent actually fizzles out.
this would happen during testing for Alan when he was close to fizzling and his opponent conceded. But the deck also had a glaring weakness. It wasn't very good going second. If the opponent could set up a monster negate to stop the Royal Magical Library from accumulating counters for a free draw, or utilize preemptive hand destruction like Mulan Glacia the Elemental Lord, then the game would
Crazy that we're talking about Mulan Glacia in 2000 and like...
Yet in spite of these flaws,
What year is this
Alan
supposed to
would
be?
still finish his regional with a 6-free record. But the deck would be brushed off by the masses as a meme-worthy deck because it didn't reach the top 16 of that regional. Alan, on the other hand, had an affinity for playing strange combo decks, and the Gishki FTK would
Dragon Ball, right?
interest. He would then take the same strategy himself to another regional tournament with 400 players, even bringing a bingo checklist form just to see how much damage it could actually cause. With some notable achievements, including winning a duel with at least 30 cards in his hand, get a judge called on him at least 5 times in a single match, and get verbally or physically assaulted by an angry mob of duelists, which luckily was not checked off. So I decided to show up to this regional, and I was, kind of in a vengeful mood, and I decided to take this Gishki FTK deck, but I decided to take this deck to ruin this event. And notably, in this tournament, he would time out at least 5 of his opponents, some of which got extremely salty and even called the judge. In fact, one player would...
This is like a bit of a stretch, but like... surely it's, I don't want to use the term punishable, but if your intent, your literal intent, your goal is to go to an event purely to be disruptive to the flow of the tournament, that has to be like a DQable like thing, right? Like, surely. Used to be close friends. I remember when we were young, my dad was picking me up and him to go to a regional, and he was grabbing Squiddy at 7 a.m. Squiddy called me at 4:30 asking my dad, and I wanted to chill. Wanted a chili dog from a 7-Eleven on the corner store. It was so random. At 4 a.m. for a chili dog? Hell yeah.
Turn the favor of sabotage
Old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Bring it back.
by deliberately
Can we time out these clowns who are, like, that, what is, why, that is not a thing, like,
cutting his deck, even if there were only 2 or 3 cards left, and asking him about every single
it's
card.
too many.
A strategy that would prove to be rather ineffective, or he
Quick
would
shot when
eventually
someone
time out
posts
and
something
lose because of
meaningful
it,
and
adding
relevant.
more fuel to the butter. Getting mad at me
That's more than
for
one
playing
sentence.
Yishki FTK, and I'm like,
I used to play
"No,
Fortnite.
this isn't my problem. This is Konami's problem. They're the one trying to promote this gameplay. I'm just taking it to its logical extreme." But through his testing, he would also realize that the deck had a slight counter within the format in the form of Thunder King Ryo. This was a card that would
Epic.
prevent him from utilizing his Gishki
Some things
cards
never
to
change.
his
Time's a
deck,
flat circle.
effectively shutting off the 6 Gishki effect monsters that would search for Aqua Mirror or Mind Office. But as long as he had draw power, he could consistently summon out a large Gishki ritual monster and then proceed to swing over Ryo by battle, continuing to combo in main phase 2. And everything went relatively as planned, for he would finish with a 7-2 record overall, barely losing in the last round and missing out on the top 8 cut. The players in the hall were so disgusted, many
Top 8? 7-2? Is this like a UDS? Why would you not top on X2? Oh, this was, I think, back when Yu-Gi-Oh! Events had like 500 players. So you needed to go like X1 or something to, Oh, it's a regional. Oh yeah, American regionals for 9 rounds. 9-round regional?
of which complained to the judges and the tournament organizers. And an active
Dear
Konami representative who was present on the scene would even ask Alan how to best hit the deck on the next ban list. At that regional, there was a Konami employee there, and he actually explicitly asked me, he's like, hey, I know that you haven't broken any rules, so to speak, but what can we do to hit this deck?
Hey, so I know you're technically not doing anything illegal. How do we ban your deck?
Games where you don't FTK with the deck, go, well, I'm gonna 1 day of piece you can't deal any damage to me, oh, it's back to me again, okay, and now I'll kill you. Now, 7-2 with such a deck and a 400-man regional was actually something respectable, and word of his performance would begin to spread online. With many more complaining on the forums, some...
Is that Bowden? Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist Bowden. Wait. Is that Bowden? Like, wait, there's no way. What a waste of a report you didn't even top. That sounds like something Bowden would say. I'm gonna screenshot this. Alright, quick little intermission. I gotta send this over to him and ask him if it's actually him. This you?
who would even email Konami.
Why do you think people hate you?
I don't mind calling people bad if they are bad. But luckily for the community, the
toxic.
RD team would hear their cries, and on the next ban list, 1 day of peace would be limited to 1 copy per deck, severely hampering its consistency.
1 day,
and
not limited, get it?
And the
To one
community would
copy.
be satisfied for what they thought was an adequate hit to make the deck disappear completely. But they were wrong. With YCS San Diego just a few weeks away, Alan didn't give up. He continued testing the deck.
Wait, so he
replacing 1 day
lied
of
to
peace
Konami staff? He lied. He lied. He said, "Oh, this is how you kill the deck. Limit 1 day of peace," and then that's all they did. What, did they not hit any Gishki cards? Like,
as an additional draw engine, though at a slightly higher gamble. Now, Cup of Ace
company so much baby.
pot of greed that nets the user 2 additional cards,
It's
but
not
only if
it's
you
not
win
his
the
fault. That's
50-50.
Konami's fault for being so averse to fucking just banning things.
Cards, but the user also loses a card from the hand in the form of a Cup of Ace that netted 0 advantage. But together with Tyler Nolan, they determined that Cup of Ace was the
This has to be a
highest mathematical
Karma
chance
clip
of
he's
still
using.
winning the duel, and
From
therefore
Dark Hall,
the
this has to be
ultimate
from Danny, right?
replacement for 1 day apiece. What I came up with is Cup of Ace. Say if you have like 2 Cup of Aces, and one of them draws you 2, the other one draws your opponent 2. That's actually fine, and sometimes can even be helpful, because one strategy that people can use against Gishki is to just set like a bunch of back rows, because then you can't legally activate hand destruction, right? Because you need 2 cards in your hand to legally activate hand destruction.
He's thought of every possible situation.
Cards
like,
and the ones
this
that
is
draw
insane.
by making my hand destruction.
Like, every possible, like,
activate.
way for his deck to just figure it out. Like, yeah, just Cup of Ace
by
lose.
hurting its bad matchups. For starters, number 16 Shockmaster was finally banned, a card that previously meant immediate loss for the deck should they win the Dyro and call spells. Now, YCS San Diego was particularly unique, and it was different from the standard
Wait, I'm an
Yu-Gi-Oh!
idiot. I
Championship
can't
series.
trigger
Instead of
Calibur's
using a
effect
constructed
anymore.
deck, for the first 9
Oh my
rounds of day
fucking
1,
god.
they would be forced to build a sealed deck from 6 packs of Battle Pack, with a 7-2 or better record required to make day 2, where Alan would then play 5 more rounds using his Gishki deck. Surprisingly, this actually made 2...
What the hell is that deck? What is that? Like, what is this? Is this a side deck? What?
Where Alan would then play 5 more rounds
What's
using
Battle
his
Pack?
Gishki deck. Surprisingly, this actually made
that
the
shit
deck
was
a lot
fire.
more viable, given that there were less
Battle
rounds
Pack
with it,
sealed.
which meant less Dyros, less variants, and ultimately a lower chance to fizzle out, providing
Snipe
the
Hunter's
deck a
got
solid
grippers.
chance to top if he could muster at least a 3-2 record with solid tiebreakers. The YCS tournament would begin
You
with the
don't
judge
listening?
handing Alan a deck box
I'm listening to
containing
my
one of
speakers.
the worst sealed pools he had ever seen. Cores the
I do miss
Ethereum
some things when I
Darkness,
reach
Solid
out.
Judgment, Mirror Force, or Damage Step battle modifiers like Forbidden Land were key cards in the sealed pool, but his deck would contain none of these, beyond one lone copy of Heavy Storm as his sole power card. I actually opened like a horrible sealed pool. I did not open a lot of power cards, but I still went 7-2. I credit that to a lot of playtesting with Michael Lutz. But unlike the majority of other players in the room, what he did have was practice. The man had taken ample time before the event to carefully research all of the niche interactions and the cards in the set, having purchased multiple cases just to practice with his friends in the weeks leading up to the tournament. Though he would be forced to endure a battle of attrition as the decks got better and better with every
Practicing sealed is an insane thing that Konami can do to milk money, by the way. It's crazy.
Champion Patrick Holbert on the
If
last
you make
round of
sealed
day 1,
events,
granting him
people
access to
buy
day 2, where
sealed
the
cards.
real tournament would begin. And on the
Sealed
next day,
the
Alan
product.
woke up knowing that he was about
Wild,
to send
huh?
a
Crazy
wake-up call to the
concept.
Yu-Gi-Oh community, the likes of which they have never seen before. But unlike at the regional, where the deck was
Online
a
tools
completely new
exist.
concept, by now
I know
a
this is
lot
a
of the
crazy
players
idea
had
as well,
caught
the
on to
concept,
fundamentals
but
and
some
the
people
basics
like
of how
playing
the
in
deck
person.
worked, having
I know,
strategies
but
at
some
that
people
regional.
like
At the regional, there's
being in the
much
card shop with
more
their
of a
friends and
reaction.
getting
Like,
a
they were
drink
just
and
flabbergasted.
going out
Like,
for
what is
food
this
and
guy?
coming
What
back
is
and
this guy doing?
playing
Why is
some
he taking
cards.
so much time? Oh my god, what the hell is happening?
Yeah, I know.
By the time
Shufflers
the
are
YCS
real
rolled
people.
around, most people were kind of vaguely aware of the deck. But at times, players would still try to play out game 1, with the match ending in a 1-0 victory for Allen as the timer hit 0. And as he reached the top tables, crowds would start forming around him to witness the toxicity happen in real time. But the man was rather attuned to the deck, so he would play at a reasonable pace, therefore the judges could not give him any slow play warnings. Nevertheless, he would feel the gaze of the judges upon his shoulder, but he would frequently remind his opponents that they could concede at any point in time, so the judges wouldn't think he was stalling or using the time maliciously in his favor. With 5 rounds in day 2, he would start with a 3-1 finish, requiring only one more win to make it into the top 32 cut, where the playoff would begin. And at this point, his utmost skill with the deck would be challenged, for his opponent was none other than Robbie Boyashin, a previous YCS champion. Not only was he a phenomenal player, but he also knew how the deck worked fundamentally, because he had friends who had texted him previously.
I didn't realize he was that good. He
early. But for some reason,
he ended up working for Konami. He was like a really good player. Then he did.
After game 1, which meant that
That's some
Allen
lore.
would be declared a 1-0 victory, propelling him into the top 32. What I believe happened
Yo, pizza. Can I see the pizza?
trying to set up a situation where we would draw the match. Because if we drew, we would both make top 32. And it's a horrible matchup for him. So he pretty much knows that unless I get very unlucky, he's not going to win. So we're going into game 2.
That is a crucial life burst, what the
While I was
hell?
still figuring out which 10 cards to take out for my 10 burn cards. They're like, nope, you don't play game 2, what's the score? And the answer was 1-0. So I won that match 1-0. Certainly upset my opponent. Some of the players watching, they assumed that like, oh, I'm just sitting there thinking about siding, trying to drain the clock. And it's like, no, I was legitimately siding. The judges, however, knew that, right? They had my deck. It was then that the judges began to sweat just a little bit, because they knew the venue would have to be closed at a certain point in time. 2 hours left during the day, they had to make sure that the tournament was not stalled. And after a quick little huddle to discuss their options, it was determined that Alan's deck still had a win condition, and the deck was actively playing to achieve that win condition, despite taking a...
I was on the judge staff and we went over why it wasn't an illegal deck. The player plays at a brisk pace, even making shortcuts at times to move as fast as possible. The fact the player is playing literally hundreds of cards in one turn is attributed to poor R&D and card design, and not the fact that the player is playing the cards in this manner. There is no repeated loop or iteration. If this were ever an issue, the player could make the semi-infinite variations of the loop one Mind August to the next, so long as the opponent deck is being depleted via hand destruction, card destruction, one day piece every iteration, and he isn't just gold fishing upstarts all day. The opponent is seeing all the cards in his deck, so he may want to continue in hopes of drawing Veilers or Heralds. It's not his fault they don't know it's futile. Alan was even nice enough to tell his opponent that they could have 20 Veilers and it wouldn't make a difference as far as the outcome. Not his fault that they cling to false hope. The head judge loved the deck and was Alan's biggest advocate. Short of an emergency ban of an integral part of the engine, you guys get to deal with it until September.
Buying and selling cards.
Oh wait, I wasn't supposed to banish that. Fuck.
First tried Magic the Gathering, I realized something pretty quickly, and I immediately called my financial advisor to tell him that I'm going all in on lands. Dude, where's my lands? That was a big mistake. I should have went with Pokemon. If you have played Magic the Gathering, you're very familiar with the concept of lands. Lands is the mana system that Magic uses in order for you to play your creatures or spells. And this is foundational to card games in general. Those card games after Magic took inspiration from the land system because it was pretty great. Now, that being said, I absolutely hate lands with all my heart. And I can already hear the comments
I
and disliking the video. Before
agree.
you start, let me explain why. But to do that, I first have to go through
Cards
how
as a
lands
resource
work.
is the
Lands are
word.
cards that you tap for mana. And you can only play one of them per turn, normally at least. Obviously, there's cards that allow you to play more, but in general, you play one per turn. And this is a very nice self-balancing act because that means that powerful effects come out later in the game rather than just completely dominating in the early game. We'll talk about that later with another card game. Lands also have colors associated with them. Depending on the cards that you're playing in your deck, you need to make sure you have a mana base of each color in order to play your cards. Which means, and most importantly, lands are physical cards that are in your deck. You have to decide how many lands you're willing to put in your deck to have a high enough chance to draw them consistently without only drawing lands. And that is exactly why I hate them. Over the hundreds of Magic games that I have played, there are times where you will only draw lands, and this is referred to as being mana flooded or just getting fucked. And you will also have games where you don't draw any lands. Where's the land? Dude, I'm gonna lose this game because I can't draw lands. This is referred to as getting mana screwed or getting fucked. Both of those can lead to games that feel absolutely miserable to play, and it honestly feels like you just wasted your time. Now, you can say skill diff or you suck at deck building or whatever you want, but just like you, I copy-pasted the best deck in Standard and it still happened, so checkmate. Now, despite how sometimes you could have non-games in Magic, there is a lot of pros for the mana system. Because lands are actual cards in your deck, there is a ton of design space for them. Like ramping. To put multiple lands in a single turn so you get additional mana compared to your opponent for a tempo loss. Or having cards that actually destroy your opponent's lands to make sure they don't have as much mana. And the list kind of goes on, and it's actually insane how Magic the Gathering is still making new and exciting mechanics after being around for 30 years. And if you go through Magic the Gathering's history, there are a ton of different lands that you can pinpoint and go, that's actually pretty cool. There's also the situation of changing how many lands you actually need. You're playing an aggro deck and your highest cost card is 3 mana. I don't need that many lands. I just need to have enough to draw 3 of them. And that allows for a lot of intricate and fun deck building, which I think is why people who really like lands love them. And I think the mana system is a lot better in a mode like Commander, where you have stuff to draw them known as fetch lands. And even though those can charge you a pretty penny, when you have a consistent mana base to play all of your amazing spells and creatures, that is where lands truly shine. And the most important thing to take away from this is mana is important in your card game because it allows you to have a self-balancing act to make sure that really powerful effects come out at an appropriate time rather than right in the very first turn of the game. And even though I don't like the land system as much as other mana systems, Magic the Gathering ended up being one of the best card games I've ever played. That leads me to Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Saw what Magic the Gathering was doing with mana and said, you know what? What if we don't have any? Surely that's not going to cause any problems whatsoever. This game is an absolute clusterfuck.
You never saw this coming. I'm kind of great to draw 3 additional cards from my deck.
And I don't even know how to describe it to you. I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of those things where you really have to experience it personally to really understand how insane this card game is. It's like watching a movie with someone who knows the ending, and I'm just watching it for the first time. I don't know what's going on. But this is the problem without having a mana base whatsoever. As the game gets power crept and cards become stronger and stronger and stronger, your first turn goes from this to this.
My grandpa's deck has no pathetic cards, Kaiba, but it does contain the unstoppable Exodia. I've assembled all 5 special cards, all 5 pieces of the puzzle.
Technically, there are more resource rules. For instance, you only get 1 normal summon per turn, and that is technically like the mana cap in each individual turn. But Konami looked at that rule and said, okay, well, what if we just print
Okay, I hate myself sometimes.
And then they printed basically every single card with that line of text. This leads to a game speed that is a light speed difference compared to Magic the Gathering. In Magic the Gathering, turn 1 is often playing a land and passing. Maybe you play a creature because you're an aggro deck. In Yu-Gi-Oh!, turn 1 is your opponent playing half of their deck, summoning 5 gods, setting up 3 negates, and essentially telling you you're not allowed to play the video game today. But don't get it twisted, as much as Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have a mana system, Yu-Gi-Oh! Does have a cost to their cards. It's reading. The mana system in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is your ability to read. Since they don't have a mana system to balance the power of their cards, they have to balance the cards by writing terms and service agreement on each individual one. For example, you could special summon this card, but you have to discard a card, you have to banish a card from the graveyard, you have to pay half your life points, and promise your firstborn child to the pharaoh. Now, because how insane Yu-Gi-Oh! Has become, when I tried it out for the very first time about 2 years ago, I thought this was the worst card game of all time. Dude, who plays this game? Like, now that I've given it its fair chance and a lot more hours into it, I have to say, there's this weird charm about it. Because you don't have to worry about getting mana screwed or mana flooded, you generally get to play your deck exactly how it's built to be played, which I think is extremely interesting. But that is assuming your opponent lets you resolve a single thing, or they don't have Maxi in their hand. And that power fantasy of, I'm gonna do the most batshit insane thing to you, and you have to be able to respond to it, is kind of just enjoyable if you're the one doing it. It's very chaotic, it's unfair for a lot of people, but at least I didn't draw 6 lands in a row and get fucked. I got fucked by my opponent instead. The most important thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that it showcases that a mana system is extremely important as cards get stronger and stronger, because it does put a restraint on how powerful things can be at a certain state in the game. Now, something interesting interesting about Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically is that it has to put
I'm
the
the one
cost
discarding
on the
cards.
card itself rather on the mana cost. Cards will have a once per turn effect or a drawback for something that
Now
can
this
be
is a
considered very
twist.
powerful because Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs to find a way to somehow limit what you can do in your turn. This obviously doesn't work as intended for the most part, but it's interesting how the design of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is so specific to itself that doesn't translate to most other card games. So in Magic, you have the chance of just not playing the game whatsoever because of your mana system, or with Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you can play the entire game in 45 seconds, there has to be some kind of middle ground, and there technically is with Hearthstone. Hearthstone decided to take the Magic the Gathering mana system, but rather than putting cards into your deck, you get it incrementally every single turn. This solves the biggest problem I have with Magic the Gathering, is that you don't get mana screwed whatsoever. The only problem is just having playable cards. And that's because Hearthstone designed its mana system to be the ultimate equalizer. It basically tells each player what you're allowed to do each turn, because if I only have 4 mana, I can only spend 4 mana that turn. That sounds really good in theory, but there is a couple issues with Hearthstone's mana system. Probably the most obvious issue with Hearthstone's mana system is just kind of how boring it is. Because it's an equalizer for both you and your opponent, there's only so much ways that you can manipulate mana without either A, being absolutely broken, or without being too ridiculous. A lot of the cards that manipulate mana in Hearthstone are just gain an empty mana crystal, or gain 2
Jokes
empty
on you,
mana
I know how to
crystals,
read.
maybe gain 3, and there's a couple of them that destroy mana crystals, but overall, especially a game compared to Magic the Gathering, there is a lot less mechanics to do with mana. That is probably a more intentional design from Hearthstone because they want the game to be way simpler. That does mean that there is a lot less design space than Magic the Gathering. The other bigger problem is that there's often just going to be curve stone, which is basically I play 1 drop on 1, 2 drop on 2, 3 drop on 3, and so on and so forth, because that's kind of just how the game is dictated.
Seems pretty straightforward. I'm gonna keep playing the most expensive card in my hand every fucking turn. Buying it.
Middle. An Urshkigov. I mean, that is pretty good. Assuming they don't get another one, or already have one. Still in their hand. Sure. Right, we live or die here.
I'm gonna keep playing the most expensive card in my hand every fucking turn.
And because Hearthstone is extremely tempo-oriented, often just playing all your mana is the best thing you can do every single turn. Which is the case in every card game, but I think it's a little bit more apparent in Hearthstone. Now, someone who has played Hearthstone all the way since closed beta, I really enjoy this mana system. I think it's really nice to never worry about, am I going to get my mana so I can play my cards? I just
Damn,
like the fact that
they
every
did play
card
it.
I'm drawing
Holy
is
shit.
actually something impacting the board and not just, gain a mana crystal. I will also say one of the biggest benefits to Hearthstone's mana system is the fact that it's really easy to nerf cards. Because mana is just given to you, and by nerfing a 3-mana card to a 4-mana card, it's a very simple and elegant thing to do, often to lower the power level of something. It's also nice because it's digital and they can just do that on the fly, but I do think that this mana system is very simple and very clean. That being said, throughout Hearthstone's entire lifespan, it's always had a really big issue with mana cheating. Mana cheating is always the best thing you can be doing in any standard metagame. And a card like Preparation, for example, which allows you to play a spell much earlier, is an extremely great card regardless of what the rogue deck is playing. And almost every single time a card can be played for 0 mana and it does something that is just good, it is gonna get played and eventually it probably will be nerfed. Now that has never stopped the Hearthstone designers from printing cards with mana reduction because it's one of the few ways they actually have design space with their mana system. Even from the core mechanics of the game, going second gives you a card called the Coin, which lets you play with its mana system. So there are ways for them to design for it, it's extremely narrow and often ends up being that mana cheating is extremely broken. Probably the case for most games with a mana system, but for me, it's pretty prevalent in Hearthstone. But you know what? At least I can't get mana flooded, and that's really all that I really care about. Does that mean Hearthstone's mana system is the best way of doing it? That may not be the case, because what if there was a game that took Magic the Gathering's mana system and fixed it? Remember at the start of this video where I told you I should have gone with Pokemon? I actually genuinely meant it. Usually from a financial standpoint, Charizard can pay off my entire house. But what about from a gameplay standpoint? Pokemon uses energy cards, and if you kind of squint your eyeballs just a little bit, you can very much see the similarities between lands and energy. Just like lands in Magic the Gathering,
I do
Pokemon
have
also
level
has
2s and
colors
1s
associated
back.
with its energy. And just like lands, you can only play one energy per turn. Of course, there are cards that change that. I don't have to say that every single time, but yes. So basically, we're playing Magic the Gathering again, except for now I'm just attaching it to Pokemon. That is not the case at all. Because in Magic the Gathering, if one of my creatures dies, I don't have to worry about discarding a land because that's not how the game functions. In Pokemon, because your energy is directly attached to Pokemon, when a Pokemon dies, all of that energy is completely gone. And that is kind of the interesting nuance of how Pokemon handles its mana system. Deciding where you want to put your energy is extremely interesting and strategic because it can change the drastic tide of the battle from putting it on a Pokemon that's benched compared to the one that's active. And just like Magic the Gathering, energy cards are physical cards you have to put in your deck, meaning it has the same potential issue as Magic the Gathering, but it's slightly different. Pokemon should have the same mana issues that Magic the Gathering has, but the main difference is you could draw a assload of cards in Pokemon. In Magic the Gathering, a card that draws 2 is often considered pretty decent. In Yu-Gi-Oh!, draw 2 is banned because Pot of Greed is broken. But in Pokemon, there are cards that literally just say discard your whole hand and draw 7. There are cards that say shuffle your hand and draw 6. But the downside of Pokemon is that when you do brick, you brick really freaking hard. Because unlike Magic, at least when you have lands, you can use them every single turn. In Pokemon, if you don't get your energy to the Pokemon that need it, you're just passing your turn and just inevitably dying to your opponent doing something. It's a system that rewards planning and aggressively going through your deck, but it can punish you heavily by overcommitting into a single Pokemon. I think that's one of the real reasons to get into the Pokemon TCG because there's a ton of risk and reward, and if you're really good at planning, it makes the mana system feel really rewarding. I will also say that Pokemon has mitigated the breaking problem quite
I
heavily.
don't have to worry about
There are
another
a ton of
Urshiga.
ways to tutor specific energy from your deck. If a
That was
Pokemon does end
genuinely
up
a
dying,
loose
there are
condition.
ways for you to get the energy back or just revive that Pokemon. So bricking is not your biggest concern when it comes to this card game. The bigger concern is when a Pokemon is able to attach more than one energy per turn, because often that strategy ends up being the best thing you can do. If I'm attaching 2 energy while you're attaching 1, I get to attack faster and my strategy is going to be infinitely better than yours. So maybe Pokemon has it all figured out with its mana system and a ton of card draw. But what if we took Hearthstone's mana system and made it a little bit more nuanced? Which is with Legends of Runeterra. Legends of Runeterra is not doing great currently. I think they just stopped making actual cards for its PvP mode. But the mana system itself is extremely extremely interesting. On the surface, it's exactly like Hearthstone. You get 1 mana per turn, all the way up to 10 mana. But Riot decided to add something called spell mana. In every other game that we've talked about, if you don't use your mana, that mana is gone. You don't get that mana back, you just kind of wasted your turn. In Runeterra, if you don't have any way to spend your mana, you can get up to 3 spell mana. And that allows the simplicity of Hearthstone while adding a ton of nuance in strategic decisions.
What do you mean
If
no
you're
valid
a late
targets?
game
They-
deck going against
What?
aggro and you don't have any early game minions, you can bank that spell mana to play a more powerful spell early, which means the
What?
cast turn button is now a mechanic that you can utilize
I mean,
to win
I had the
game.
defenses.
This
I
mana
was
system
going to
does
win
suffer
either
the
way,
same
but
problems as Hearthstone. It's very linear. Often mana reduction on the cards themselves is just the best strategy. But I do think that taking Hearthstone's very simplistic, very easy to understand mana system, making it slightly more nuanced, was a very good call from the Runeterra developers. And I think, by far, this was my favorite mana system I got to play with until Lorcana came out. This game also proves that Disney will not rest until they take every single dollar you have from your bank account because they wanted to get into card games. Lorcana kind of looked at Magic the Gathering and said, I can fix you. They wanted to get into card games. Lorcana kind of looked at Magic the Gathering and said, I can fix you. That can fix your mana system. Because Lorcana uses a system called inking. Almost every single card in your deck, depending on how you build it, can be inked. And you could do that once per turn. Which this adds a really interesting development into the land system of, do I want to keep this card in my hand to potentially play it to impact the board, or do I want to ink it in order for me to get an additional mana crystal every single turn? And this creates a new, interesting idea of understanding what cards need to be sacrificed for your mana crystals, or that you need to actually win the game. And it adds an extreme level of
I
complexity
do like
to
that
every
deck
single
though.
game of
I'm gonna
Lorcana.
I'm
Now,
gonna
not
copy it
every single
actually.
card in Lorcana is inkable, and that
It's the
actually
best
adds
way
a
to
lot to the deck building as
play
well, kind of like
Ershkigal.
lands do, where you have to ask yourself, can I put enough of these cards that
And
can be inked in order
I
to
do
actually
like
have
those
a
trio.
consistent game plan and get the mana
It
I
fits
need
the
to
bully
play them?
playstyle.
And for
It
people
fits their
already writing this
bully
in the
character.
comments,
It's
this
in
is
character for them
essentially
to
the
play
exact same
aggro
system
like
that
that.
another game called Duel Masters did. From a physical card game medium, I think this is the best way of doing it. It dramatically reduces the non-games that Magic the Gathering has, and it forces you to make a lot of strategic decisions that no other card game has really done before. Now, kind of the same issue that Hearthstone and Runeterra has, there's not a lot of design space for inking. The Sapphire color does allow you to ramp, kind of like Magic the Gathering, but that's basically it. There are ways to interact with your opponent's inkwell, but for the most part, it's very similar to the same problems that Hearthstone has. It's actually really interesting how by doing this video, I've come to kind of appreciate Magic's mana system a little bit more. I may not fully like the fact that I can get mana flooded or mana screwed, but I do think its mana system is by far the most creative and it allows for the most design space out of any other card game we've talked about thus far. It's kind of funny that all these card games try to solve the mana flooding issue that Magic can potentially deal with, but by doing so, they're limiting the design space that they have in their own card game. I also want to mention one card game that isn't necessarily a CCG or a TCG, and that is Inscription. If you've never played this wonderful game, it has a really cool resource system where there are 2 decks rather than one. One is actually cards that you want to play for the board, and the other one is your mana. And I think that allows you to make a really interesting decision of, what do I need more? A card for my deck, or would I rather have the guaranteed mana? I think that one is actually really interesting. I'd like to see that in an actual card game. And of all of these card games, which one do I think has the best mana system? I think Lorcana does. I think it's the nice balance between a ton of complexity and being a very good equalizer for both you and your opponents. But let me know what you think about this video down below, what mana systems you enjoy. I'll see you guys in the next one. Also, if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe. It helps out a ton.
Alright, our centers. Maho. Turns out the only thing that carries off well here is the freaking natural bacteria. The ink system is literally just the Enter system in WeCross. Incredible. Almost. The Enter system is still my favorite energy system. I was against it at first. I wasn't a fan of essentially turning a card, forcing you to turn cards into resources, but the way it interacts with your life points, as well as the extra layer of decision making it introduces, I absolutely adore it. Especially considering, unlike every other card game he mentions, uh, Enter is a resource, but you don't need to pay Enter to do anything. Because primarily you're tied down by your level limit. Level limit area B. Who do they play specifically?
Na plasma. Am
Oh, that's a lame ass alt art. I genuinely don't remember what else they were playing. Right, Amoeba. Oh yeah, they were playing spells. It's a wild card that's only really useful sometimes. But that's just how it is since there's no side decking. Dragon Maid. I'm pretty sure you played like 4 of these, right? No way you wouldn't. Alright, Cordyceps is a powerful defense. Oh, she has an in archetype boss. Yes, of course. Oh, you were a level 2. Huh. I thought it was like an alt art. Just goes to show how little attention I pay. Yeah, because this one has a discard optional effect. Yeah, wow, dude. I'm very smart. Cordyceps, gross. The last card is Mew. It's pretty obvious the ratios being played here for the most part, I feel like. Do we play 4 of each of the level 2s? Because these are the only forms of removal we're playing for our life bursts. And I do prefer removal as protection, because those convert seamlessly into offense.
We
As we're fine with that somehow. We're playing a ton of Mew.